everybody. Miss O here. I'm so glad to see that we have some people viewing. I know we have plenty of teachers who are streaming to their classrooms as well. So if your students in your Google Meets have questions for our amazing guest we have today, please put them in the chat down below so we can get these questions to Adam as well. But I'm so excited to introduce the coolest guest I think we've had so far for a HAPA Talkback, Adam Jacobs. Hi, Adam.
Hey, guys. Hello.
Awesome. So, Adam, just so we can start everybody else off on the same page here, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Sure. My name is Adam Jacobs, and I'm a Broadway actor. As you can see by my photos or my pictures behind me, I've done a few shows. I'm most known for playing Aladdin in Disney's Aladdin on Broadway and also on the national tour in Chicago. Some of you may have seen me there at the Cadillac Palace a couple years ago. I also played Simba in The Lion King. That was my first Disney show on Broadway. And then before that, I played Marius in Les Mis, and that was actually my Broadway debut. So I've been, a Broadway performer, a long time. I studied at NYU and at Tisch School of the Arts and got my degree in theater there. I'm kind of going backward in time. I'm originally from San Francisco, California. I grew up there, and I was in all the high school plays and musicals, and that's where I really decided I wanted to pursue the arts as a career, because I had a really great teacher there who was encouraging me to do it. That's it. I'd say, can I go further back in time and say well, yeah, I think that sums it up, I think.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's been a busy lifetime thus far. But,
yeah.
As an educator, I always like to start off with this question. So we have students who are interested in the arts in so many different mediums and capacities, and they all have different things they want. So what was it like making the decision to go to the Tisch School for the Arts? And how did you find your way to that decision and know that it was the right place for you?
Well, I think I knew that for the musical theater, New York was sort of the place to be, and still is. You have 40 Broadway houses putting on the highest level of professional shows, all in one place there. That's not to say Chicago doesn't have amazing theater. I'm not knocking Chicago, not knocking Chi-Town, but I'm saying when I was growing up, I knew that my goal was to one day perform on Broadway. So I thought, what better place to study than in New York, at one of the best schools in the country for musical theater, which was at the time New York University. And so that was sort of a no-brainer in terms of where I wanted to go. Actually getting in was, going to be the hard part. I had to audition and go through a bunch of different, rounds of auditions. And as you guys will find out, trying to get into colleges, that you have to do the runaround. But really, I mentioned before, I had a mentor, and he was my English teacher / drama teacher. And he cast me in all of the plays and musicals back at St. Ignatius. It was the St. Ignatius, like Loyola around here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a Jesuit. It was a Jesuit high school, and it is a Jesuit high school. And they cast me in all these shows. And his name was Mr. Devine, Peter Devine. And it was him. It was his sort of influence. I feel like I pretty much owe my career to him, because he saw the potential in me. And at the time, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if this was a career I wanted. And he kind of pulled me aside one day. He was like, you have the talent. If you want to pursue this as a career, this is, something you might want to look into. And at the time, I was playing soccer. I was doing a bunch of things, and I wasn't really sure. But at that point, it kind of just clicked. All it takes is one person sometimes to be like, hey, you should think about this. And so that's what happened with me. And so the decision then, I applied to UCLA to University of Michigan, and to New York University. And I went with New York was my first choice, and I was fortunate enough to get that. And that's how it happened.
Yeah, I think that's so many high schoolers who are planning to go to college for the arts have that experience of having to have that moment where things click into place and you realize that this is what you got to do. I'm curious, do you know, it was a few years ago, but do you remember what that audition process was like for the different colleges and what sort of preparation you had to do in order to make it happen for yourself?
Back in those days, you would carry like a boom box with your track to the school or to some, random like elementary school where they were holding the auditions, and you would play your music. I actually, for New York or NYU, I don't know why I did this, but I sang, what is it? Bring Him Home from Les Mis. As I'm like this scrawny little teenager singing Valjean's soliloquy, and but I sang it well enough that they were like, "How old are you?" "Oh, wow, okay." And well, and they put me into the program. It was good enough, and I showed enough potential. But it was the sort of thing where you kind of, it's still like this now. You have to travel kind of across the country and go on the campuses, see what it feels like. And, when, of course, New York has amazing energy, unlike any other place. One of the downsides is that it doesn't have an actual like campus. So I kind of missed out on, like the Friday Night Light football games and that sort of thing. Like, having a stadium and fraternities and all that. I didn't have that as much, that experience. At the same time, I was immersed in the theater world, and my teachers, my theater teachers, they would, teach me during the day and then moonlight and go perform in a show that night and practice what they were talking about. And that was invaluable because you're like, oh, now I get it. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
Yes, that was really cool to have that sort of hands-on experience. And you just build up the network. Being in New York, it's and into this industry in general, it's all about just making connections with people. And in any industry, really, as you guys will find out, it's as you make connections with people and relationships, they're gonna kind of help you out later on down the road.
Absolutely. So you actually mentioned Les Mis. That Les Mis was your first Broadway role, correct?
That's right. I did the national tour for a year. And then the 2006 revival, when they did it with, it was like a non-traditional cast with Daphne Rubin Vega, Norm Lewis as Javert, and then Lea Salonga came in to replace Daphne, and it was very multi-ethnic, which was awesome. I love that the title that your school is HAPA, because I consider myself HAPA, a mixed race of half white, half Filipino, melting pot person. That's me. So it's kind of cool.
Totally. So what was it like getting that first job? What was the path to that first job? How did you find your way there?
So I was already in New York, and I had been auditioning for this one casting company called Tara Rubin Casting. I'd been going in for them for over a year, and I had already graduated. I wasn't booking anything. I was getting kind of discouraged. I was living off of peanut butter sandwiches and top ramen. And I'm like, oh, geez, is this going to be my life? Fine. But eventually, Tara Rubin Casting got to know my work. Even though I didn't book those shows I auditioned for, I was doing my best at each of those auditions, and they were getting to know me and getting to trust my work, essentially. And and I just wasn't the right fit for those particular roles. So that when Marius opened up for the national tour, I went in and I had a great audition, and they were able to sort of vouch for me to the producers and be like, this guy, is good. We know he's going to be great in the role. He does good work. So that's kind of how it is. You just kind of develop that relationship with the casting people, and over time, and they were able to trust me in that big role, and that was sort of my breakout. That was my breakout role, and then from there, I did the revival of playing Marius as well. So it was very, fortunate, but at the same time, looking back, I'm like, yeah, that seemed like the logical progression of how things should be. I mean, you hear about people graduating from college and going straight to Broadway, and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really happen very often, but that's not really the norm. You kind of have to put in your dues a little bit. I did theme parks, cruise ships, regional gigs, kind of worked my way up with experience, and that's the more typical path that actors take.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thinking about all of that no you had to hear before you eventually heard yes, and wondering how you learned to. I think every actor needs to learn this earlier the better. The earlier the better, right? Is to cope with no. So when did you learn to cope with hearing no so often?
Oh, I haven't learned how to cope with no yet. No, you do have to just kind of develop a thick skin and get used to hearing that rejection. And the more that you audition, the more natural it'll be, because you realize there's so many elements that are out of your control. It could be your height. It could be, if you even fit the costume, it's ridiculous things a lot of the time. And so all you can do is just go out there and do your best work and hope that things will hit. It's kind of like a numbers game. Like the more you audition, the better the chances are that you are going to book something. So you don't want to be so like tied or invested in one particular audition, even though you may want it really, really bad. It's probably better if you like pretend that you don't, because you don't want to feel desperate. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Just go in there and be confident and be prepared, and that's it. Just and keep doing that, and eventually, even if you don't book that one, it's really just going and keep going, and the persistence and the determination to continue on, because it is rough. You're gonna have days where you're like, I don't know, am I ever gonna get there? Is this ever gonna happen? And it takes a little bit of determination for that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it sounds like those no's, you have to remember that it's not a no to you as a person, right? It's a no for now, for this thing.
Right.
And so the students, the sooner we learn that, the sooner we'll.
It's hard. And I know like a lot of you will be like, oh, I didn't get the lead, but you should still be appreciative that you get to be in the show, So it's like, it's hard. It is hard, especially I know at that age, like everything is so important.
Huge.
Everything is so important. Everything's huge. But it's important to kind of step back and put things in perspective when you can. And I know that's really hard to do, especially for people in high school. But the more that you can kind of look at the bigger picture, you'll see that things aren't as I think who is it? Mary Poppins, the higher you go up, the less things seem. I think Bert said this in Mary Poppins. The way things look from higher up when he's up on the roof. The way things look up on the roof, they seem small. They're not as important. So it's good to think about that perspective.
Absolutely, that's awesome. So let's talk about Aladdin a little bit. So
Sure.
I was talking with a colleague. So I haven't had the privilege of seeing Aladdin. I know I have several students here who actually did, or at least one student who did get to see you in Chicago a couple years back, which is awesome. But you were doing 8 shows a week. Aladdin is an extremely physical role. There's running, jumping, fighting, and you have to be able to sing and speak without just collapsing on the stage. So how did you have to condition yourself in order to sustain a role like that?
Yeah, so really the rehearsal process is where you kind of build up that conditioning. And you start to do the show, once, 2, 3 times in a week or in a day. A lot of times you'll do Friend Like Me, like when we were learning Friend Like Me, we would do it like 10 times in a row, and that just builds up your cardio right there, and you're just exhausted after that first day. But then eventually you start to get a little bit more stamina. And but yeah, doing 8 shows a week is no joke, and it is sort of like it is being an athlete. I liken it to being like almost like an Olympic marathon runner in a sense, because you are expending a ton of energy every day, every show, sometimes twice a day, and sometimes you'll have double show like weekends, so Saturday, Sunday, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday, and maybe 1 Friday night. So it's like 5-show weekend. We would say we got a 5-show weekend, and so you have to learn what your body can do and how to sort of. I hate using the word pace, because you never want to feel like you're giving less than 100% every show, but you can't go out on a Tuesday and give 150% for that show and expect to be okay for the 5-show weekend. You know what I mean? Like you have to figure out, for me, it was about figuring out how to implement my technique to be the most efficient kind of actor, right? It's all about efficiency. And when you have good technique, you can really figure out ways to achieve that.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm just thinking about it, and when we have a musical, right, we do The Little Mermaid maybe twice in one day at most, and people are exhausted, right? So that is just, I mean, you have to work so hard. And the stuff you do outside of the theater, it goes without saying, getting proper rest and sleep and eating well and not partying after the show. I mean, that's such a temptation for a lot of people, is to go out and grab a drink, after the show and at the bar or something. But, you have to just everything in moderation, and you have to know your limits. Basically, you have to know what you can do and still be able to give these people who are paying hundreds of dollars to come see you in a show, which is ridiculous. It should not be that expensive, but it is, because it's a business, show business. You want to be able to give them your best every time. Yeah. I'm curious, what was it like to get that call that you got the role of Aladdin?
It was incredible. It was kind of crazy, because I was actually doing a show in Atlanta, and I had just gotten injured from a pyrotechnic accident, and I got a huge burn on my hand. It was like 2nd-degree burn, and I'm sitting there all bandaged up, and I'm like it was tech week. We were gonna open. I was gonna miss like the first few things, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, I don't know, if I'm gonna be able to make it. And then I get the call from the Disney producers that evening saying, like, we want you for Toronto and for the subsequent Broadway production in 2014. And I was like, I went from the deepest depths to over the moon in like a course of like 10 minutes. And my wife was there, and we were just like so happy. And I'm like with my hand, I'm like, yay, ow, yay, that sort of thing. It was just crazy. But it felt really cool, because I loved Aladdin growing up. I watched it. I watched that, the VHS. I watched that over and over, wore it out. And he was my favorite Disney character, because he was kind of looked like me a little bit, and was kind of, and I never would have thought at that time that I would grow up and play him on Broadway and get to originate a role, which is, that's when you're the first person to actually play the role, for those who don't know, and you get to create the character, and everybody who plays it after you kind of does what you do, essentially. The stage directions that you read in the play are based on that original cast, usually. So, like when I do this as Prince Ali, and I beat my chest and I do my silly little bow with a toe touch, like that got in there, So it's like that's now the stage direction, So it's crazy.
Yeah, that must be just interesting to even think about. When you look at other scripts, I would be thinking about that. That's so cool. All right, so now that we're on the Aladdin subject, I'd like to bring on Miss B, who has a couple technical questions about Aladdin.
All right. Miss B. Hey, Miss B.
That's right. Hey. So really, I teach technical theater as well as direct some of our shows and stuff as well. And, I did get to see you in Chicago, which was great. And there are quite a few special effects in Aladdin specifically. Can you talk to us about how those kind of get put in and what as an actor you have to be aware of when we're talking about bringing an animated show onto the stage?
Right. Well, in terms of just like the technical stuff, the Aladdin musical was a huge production. For every person you saw on stage, there's at least 2 or 3 people behind the scenes, in the crew and in wardrobe and in sound. So it's like over 180 people just for this production. And there were over 80 illusions. If we're talking about like magic tricks, for example, there's over 80 of those. And, it was such a big production. And you had to be really aware of everybody and what they were doing, especially backstage. It could be dangerous with like set pieces, like the buildings in Aladdin, they were operated wirelessly. And even though they were brought out on a track, they would turn wirelessly, and sometimes those would malfunction. So it's like there's a lot of things you have to be like careful of, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question exactly, but yeah, it's just being aware and also just being appreciative of all the people that are there to keep you safe. They're like, watch out, this thing's flying in, and as Aladdin, I'm jumping, I'm doing sliding down poles. I'm basically doing American Ninja Warrior on stage every night. And actually
with the microphone on. Yeah.
I did play that in my dressing room to sort of like inspire myself. So yeah, that's kind of it, I think.
Cool. Yeah. And of course there is the magic carpet scene, and I understand if you can't reveal those secrets, but for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's about the coolest thing. And as a tech person, I'm like, how are they doing that? How is that?
It's what is that? It's a real flying carpet. It really is pretty amazing when you see it. And I got to write it every night. And, the first time was pretty scary, but then after a while it was like, all right, I got this.
Well, and that's the question too, is like, we see as an audience, of course, we see just the good things, right? The illusion of it. But as an actor, we still are thinking about those safety things. So what kind of safety precautions are there for you up in the air?
When I'm up there, I have a harness on underneath my pants. It's like a belt thing. And so does Jasmine. And when I say, do you trust me? And she gets on the carpet and we sit there. And as I'm singing my initial lyrics, I can show you the world, I am clipping her in, like trying to find the clip and like clipping and trying to be romantic and trying to clip myself in, then clip her in. And I'm doing all that while the carpet is going up into the air and I'm singing those first few lines. So it's kind of like your right brain and your left brain, like working simultaneously. And as an actor, that is part of it. You have to like be aware of your light, make sure you're in your light, make sure you're being safe with the harnesses or whatever it is. Don't step off the stage into the orchestra pit when you're trying to emote or dance. Be aware of your surroundings. Don't bang into other people. So it's that sort of thing. You're spacing. It's just like important to make sure that part of your brain is working while you are. And in rehearsals, that's where you kind of discover all that. And hopefully you get to a place where you don't have to think about it because you've done it so many times and everybody has done it and they know where they're supposed to be. And you get into this kind of routine and then it becomes fun because then you can really play and perform. And that's a great place to be.
Sure. I think that's what we talk to our students a lot about, preparation. And if you know all those lines and all those things, that's the last thing you have to think about so that you can focus on, character, but then all, clipping in so that you don't fall off the carpet. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you don't fall 40 feet off onto the deck.
Would you mind talking to us a little bit about Lion King and the puppetry aspect of that and how that changes for you as an actor to have this big headpiece and the makeup aspect for you as well for Simba.
Of course. It's really cool to have these elements to help inform your character and really help a person transform. Because, up until I had my first dress put in, I didn't really know. We did have like the practice headpieces in rehearsals when I was learning it. But when you actually get everything on and you have like the authentic African beading and you have this carbon fiber thing on your head with the hair and like it's pretty incredible that that you're able to sort of use that to inform your character. And that thing is heavy, so like you don't really realize it. Like when you move your head, it like starts to carry you. So it's that sort of thing where it's like you have to get used to it. Yeah, I mean, it was such an incredible experience, such a beautiful, majestic show. And, at the end when he climbs Pride Rock and he gets to the top and he whips his robe back and he's finally the king, the ascension of the king. It's just cool. And I was so lucky. I mean, that audition process took a long time for me to be able to play that role. And it was just that much more fulfilling when I got it, because I love that musical.
Well, and that goes along with too of what you're saying in terms of inhabiting the character. Like with this, you're playing an animal, right?
Right,
so
right.
Kind of process that's a little different. You can explore how Aladdin feels and what he might write.
Right.
But now we're talking about, the characteristics, especially for this production of Lion King, of putting those animal elements into it. So what kind of
sure.
do you have to do?
If you want to get specific, I mean, I worked with Julie Taymor and the director, and all the movements were based on Balinese and Javanese movements that they had sort of implemented from that culture, right? So all of this stuff that you see was very kind of, used. It was used to further the storytelling and make it seem more like animals, so that when we have the eyes on the mask, you have to make sure that they are pointing to where you want them to point. And we did a lot of animal work, basically, trying to inhabit what it was like to be a cat, to be a lion. And I imagine the people who did cats had to do a lot of the same work. Yeah, all of those things that you get to focus on make the character that unique. I mean, it makes it such a unique experience because you have these elements which you don't have in any other show, right? So, but it was great to be able to work with Julie and also the associate director to kind of figure out, what your mask is able to do. They called it the double event because you're able to see the puppeteer. It's not hidden. It's not bunraku Japanese style. It's like you can see the person there, and so when the person's operating the cheetah, you see the cheetah, but you also see the puppeteer, and that's part of the experience, right? Julie purposely wanted to have that exposed so that you can see the storytelling happening, and it's sort of like a meta experience. And yeah, it's no other show had ever done anything like that. Disney was taking a huge risk in trying it, but now it's like the longest running Disney show on Broadway right now, and it's super successful in over 8 countries. It's like it's crazy, and I'm just happy I got to be small. I did it for 2 years. I did the national tour and on Broadway for a year, and that was amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's how I saw it too on the national tour. So maybe I saw you there. I should check my playbill. But yeah, it is very beautiful, and those puppets are quite amazing. So, all right, let me bring Miss O back on. All right,
Hello,
all right, I'll let you take it from there. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so I actually had a minute to comb through these comments here, and something that I'm seeing over and over again. and since it seems like you have quite a bit of experience with this, is the students want to know how you even get into the room for an audition for Broadway, right?
Sure.
What does that process look like?
Well, a lot of these Broadway shows have what they call required calls, required equity calls. And equity is the actors union, by the way. Mm-hmm. And they will have every 6 months or every year, they'll have a chorus call, usually every 6 months for chorus. And then every 6 months for principal auditions. And what they're doing basically is trying to find people for the show because they know that some people will leave and they're going to have roles to fill. So the casting people are constantly making sure they have an updated database of actors, essentially, to choose from. So you have these required calls that happen. And then you also have these special calls that happen, like when somebody drops out and they need an immediate replacement. Mm-hmm. If you have an agent, they will be able to hopefully get you into that room as like a vacation replace. Like if somebody's out on vacation, you come in, so a lot of these things happen through either agents, or if you go just on the equity website, you'll see all the required calls. That's actorsequity.org, and they'll list the upcoming auditions in your location. And those are for the union gigs, right? And but that's how you kind of have to break into Broadway, is just start doing more the professional route. You can do you should definitely do the community theaters and everything else to get your experience, and then once if you decide to go to Broadway or to New York, you'll be there when these auditions are happening, because that's where most of the auditions happen for Broadway shows are there. So you kind of have to be there. But so you have the agent calls, you have the chorus, the required chorus calls and principal calls. And back in the day, they had like backstage.com, or they had backstage newspapers, and they would list them in the newspapers. They don't do that anymore. But, Backstage is still up and running. It's a running periodical. I think it's online now. I'm sure it is. And, Actors Access. There's like a bunch of different websites you can look at for auditions specifically. But for Broadway, it's usually Actors Equity that handles most of those.
Yeah. So these guys, to my students, it seems like you're not just going to find this on a list on a website. You need to be in the in, right? You have to be in Actors Equity, and you have to probably have an agent, right? So you're not just walking into these rooms. You're being asked to be there.
Yeah, eventually, these auditions where a role opens up, because that is quite frequent, where it's like they need an immediate replacement for somebody. Mm-hmm. And usually the casting director will already have a group of people that they've auditioned from the previous auditions, or that they know from other shows that they've cast them in. So it's really just breaking in to it's hard to break into that group, but once you get there and you've auditioned and you've done a few things, then you get a reputation, and they hopefully will want to use you. But it's really just being there, putting yourself out there, and just knocking on those doors until eventually you get your chance.
Yeah, awesome. This is going to sound like a silly question, but I think you'll follow me here. I'm trying to make a little point. What happens if you walk into one of these auditions, say 20 minutes late, and you didn't call, and you maybe don't have an excuse?
Yeah,
what's going to happen there?
There's a chance that word will get back to the casting people. Well, first of all, those producers who are there and the casting people there will not be happy with you, especially if you didn't call and let them know that, for whatever reason. If you just show up late, it definitely shows that you are not professional. And even no matter how much you are prepared, or if you think you're going to be late, you definitely want to call ahead and let them know. Otherwise, it just really looks bad, and they're not going to want to work with somebody who they think is going to show up late to rehearsals and possibly to performances.
Awesome. Good to know.
Yeah.
That's what I thought you might say.
Did you so? Did you set me up?
I did it a little bit, just a little bit. Now, so I was looking at your website. I see you have some training for TV as well, and some TV experience. Yeah. What's the difference for you when you go to act in front of the camera versus a Broadway house?
It's totally different. Two different mediums. I took 2 semesters of film and TV training at NYU before I graduated because I wanted to have a little bit of that training. And, the camera is another person in the scene and they pick up every little nuance. And you do not have to do much. It's more internalized acting that you're doing, right? And so, a lot of the stereotypes for Broadway actors who are trying to break into film is that, they are too big. Everything they're doing is just loud and bigger than it needs to be, which can be generally true. So you have to be aware, like when you're doing one or the other, it's important to adjust. You have to adjust. You don't have to project to hit the back of the house. The camera's going to pick it up. I was on set for Chicago Med last year, and I was kind of surprised by how quiet everybody was talking. Pretty much like just whispering. They were whispering like this, and I was like, "What?" And so I kind of was like, "All right, I guess I should do my role like that." So I kind of brought it back in, and I was trying to like fit the tone because it's very important. Tone is very important on these TV shows. And you want to make sure you're matching what other people are doing, right? And so that was an experience. But yeah, it's all about just kind of adjusting, who you're performing for.
Yeah. And would you say that if a young actor knows that they would, like I'm seeing a comment here, I only really want to act on TV. Would you tell that student to go to a different type of program or look for one that's specific to that? Or it seems like you worked with a couple programs maybe outside of Tisch.
Sure. Well, actually, the Stone Street Film and Television Studios at the time was part of Tisch. It was just another one of the 12 studios within Tisch, the umbrella. And I just transferred. But I would say definitely, you want to do some on-camera training if you want to act on TV and on films. At the same time, that's not negating the experience that you can get from a basic acting class that's not on camera, right? Because acting is acting, right? Accessing emotion and storytelling through, it's all the same. And so you want to make sure you have a strong core, a strong foundation of acting to be able to then, do it in either medium. Right. And I always say that acting is even more important than taking voice. It's more important than taking dance. I think all of those things, because think about somebody who has amazing vocal technique or dance, like they can kick their face or they can do triple pirouettes and all these amazing things. But if there's nothing going on, if there's no acting, you don't care. Right. You're like, oh, wow, cool. You can do tricks. But it's all about connecting it. And the transitions and all that stuff. So like the acting actually happens in between the lines and in between those amazing moments, right? So anyway, I'm just getting on my acting high horse, but that's how I feel about how important it is to have that strong foundation. And a lot of times it's going to just come over time, right? Life experience. As kids, you might not have it yet, but you can cultivate it. And you can kind of, when things happen in your life, you can remember that and use that, right? And your life becomes your palette in a way.
Yeah. And this actually reminds me of this question that's always in the back of my mind as an acting teacher is like, a painter goes home and practices painting, and a singer at the end of the day goes home and practices singing. What do you as an actor do? What does your at-home practice look like? How do you keep growing after you've left this structure of education, formal education?
Right. So even though you stopped the formal classes at whatever institution, you continue to grow by, number one, watching other amazing actors, right? you always want to be immersing yourself and figuring out what they're doing that makes them so good. And you want to try to figure that out for yourself, and try to copy that in a way. And then, of course, you still want to exercise those acting muscles. You can't just sit and watch TV, obviously. You have to take an improv class, take acting for camera, or take a scene study class where you get to listen and react, especially in scenes. Like, it's very important. Listening is like the number one thing, so that you are really truly present, right? And figuring out, what's really going to work, and what just putting more tools in that toolbox, essentially, and continuing to maintain those acting muscles. Like at the gym, you have to just work those muscles if you want to maintain a level of strength. And it's the same thing with it's like maintaining a car. You gotta do those exercises, and then it becomes that much more accessible when you need it, because it's there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I'm also thinking now, like, so much of learning is doing, right? Like auditioning, being on stage on Broadway. You learn a lot while you're on the job.
Yeah, the most. You learn the most when you're actually doing it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But what are you doing now? What have you been up to since the shutdown? Yeah. So what does this look like for you since quarantine, since COVID hit?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's been rough. I have 2 twin boys, and they are just like, they're 7 years old, and they're tearing through the house. And it's been hard, but the flip side is that I love having them and spending all this time with them. They're getting super spoiled, but work-wise, it's been just waiting, and it's been almost interminable. But I have had a few bright spots. Like my wife and I, over the summer and fall, we did these backyard Broadway intensives. We did some classes for the local theater kids who had all their shows canceled. We did some things, spaced out with masks in our backyard, but we were able to do that. I've been doing a lot of stuff online, online concerts, benefits, and video messages like Cameo for Valentine's Day or birthdays. Sure. So that's been taking up a lot. Really, that's like the majority of my work right now. It's just like recording messages, happy birthday to, like that kind of thing, and just kind of waiting. There have been auditions. Like there's been an uptick for sure in auditions this past month, because I think people are anticipating things are going to open up. It's going to be soon. And already there's fall schedules opening up. And it looks like I may be going to New York for a workshop and a production. So I'm looking forward to that. So I see light at the end of the tunnel. And I want to tell everybody there, just hang on a little bit longer, because we're almost there. And once everything opens up again, it's going to be like the floodgates. People are dying for theater, and it's going to be really exciting, I think. And hopefully you'll see sort of a resurgence and like this renaissance of art from people, who have been creating during the pandemic. I'm hoping that you're going to see a lot more works that include people of color, and just like expand on the diversity and the inclusion and all that, because I'm big on that. And I hope that I'm excited for that, because I know it's on the horizon. Yeah.
I mean, I think that when we all get our joy from this, it's been so tough to be online and keep motivated. But I think that now is the greatest time to be motivated. So we're ready when we get the chance to get back out there and do stuff live and in person. I have a question about Aladdin or any role that you played for a long time. I mean, I'm sure it does get a little bit exhausting to do the same thing night after night. But I'm curious, was there something in Aladdin that you looked forward to doing every single show, no matter what was going on in your life? There was one moment that you looked forward to, or one song. Was there something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of moments that kept me going. I did that show over 1,500 times, I think. I don't even know the actual number. I need to call Tom Schumacher at Disney and be like, hey, what is the number of shows I did? But I think, you know, it's hard to keep it fresh for over a long period of time. And as an actor, you have to find ways and tricks to do that. I know that when I hear the opening sequence of Proud of Your Boy, like I am going to feel emotional, and it's immediately going to put me into where I want to be for that song. When Friend Like Me, at the end of Friend Like Me, and the fireworks are going off, and you hear the roar of the crowd. I mean, that never gets old. It never gets old. And you're sitting there with the genie. You know, it's like. Also, speaking of the genie, you know, he had some artistic license where there were sections he could ad-lib, so that kept it fresh too, right? Built-in spots where he could kind of play, and so that was really fun because you never know. Each show is going to be slightly different, right? And even though it was the same show, every show was different. There was, you know, it could have been just the way that you say a line slightly differently, which impacts the other actor. You know, there's so many. You might sing a line differently, slightly, and put a little bit more emphasis on one part, and that totally changes the meaning of the feel of the song. And like, yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of live theater right there. It's like it's a unique experience that's shared between the actors and the audience that can't be replicated ever again. Like that experience that you're having, you can't replay it on TV. You know what I mean? It's like you can't TiVo that. That's a moment in time that you are sharing that is special, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm thinking now too, like so you recorded the Broadway cast album for Aladdin.
Yeah.
Like obviously singing for a Broadway house and then singing in a studio. How did you adjust to that change and make it feel consistent with what you were performing live on stage?
Yeah, I mean, I was really nervous, honestly, to record, because I was like, that's forever. When you do a show, it's like done and done, on to the next one. If you mess up, you got another chance tomorrow, right? But recording, that's like forever, right? So, and I do recall the first one of the days we were supposed to record. It was at the end of like one of our first few weeks of performances, and my voice was just shot, and like I did not feel like I could do it. And, you know, you have like Alan Menken and the producers there, and to have to be able to say, look, I don't think I can do this. Like, it takes courage and also like humility I was like, I feel like we're going to have to postpone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And they're like, oh, but they were also very supportive. You're like, okay, you know, we'll do that. We'll make it work. Right. And so you have to be also, you know, trusting that, because the last thing you want to do is get on there and sound awful, right? So you have to be able to speak up for yourself when you know that you have to speak up for yourself. That's kind of the moral there. But yeah, singing on the album was so cool because you had Alan Menken there who wrote the music, and he's giving you direction, and you know, it was such a magical thing. And I was there in the room when we were working on Whole New World with Courtney Reed, my Jasmine, and he comes in, he's like, you know, I think I want to change this up a little bit. And we're like, you want to change Whole New World? You want to change the Grammy Award-winning song that's been sung by how many countless artists? And he's like, yeah. If you know him, he's like all over the place and very high energy. And so he gets behind the piano, he starts playing, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to add a key change here. And I want the beginning to have this like sort of like ethereal, and I was like a suspension. He's like, yeah, like a suspension. Like, and so we created that version of A Whole New World. I'm proud to say. So it's that kind of stuff where you're like, I got to pinch myself. Like, this is really happening. You know, that's the kind of things you look back and you're like, you know, when is that ever going to happen?
Seriously. Well, and it must be, I mean, I'm just imagining what it must be like to listen to yourself sing on the Broadway cast recording of Aladdin. That's got to be cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I'm like, I feel like I sound different. You know, I'm like, do they make me sound younger somehow? Like, how do they do that? You know, they speed it up. Do they, auto tune, or what do they do? I don't know. But no, it's great. You know, and sometimes it'll come on Spotify or something, and my kids, you know, they're like, Daddy, and now they're like, I don't care now. But yeah, it's really, I feel very fortunate. And then, you know, I also got to make an album of Alan Menken music as a result of working with him. And I got to go to his house and go through all of his catalog of songs and pick what I wanted. Some songs that nobody had ever heard of, and put them on an album. And it was my debut solo album. And I was like, you know, I was so lucky to be able to have that opportunity.
That sounds like a really cool experience.
Yeah.
So I am now thinking we are going to pull a couple questions from our live commenters. They've been just having such a great time. So what we have first here is, this is from my student Angelita, who is asking, how is the switch from doing such a classic show like Les Mis to a Disney show?
Yeah, so that's a big shift, right? I did Les Mis, and actually right after Les Mis, I did Mamma Mia, and I played Sky in the national tour. And like that shift, because it was immediately after, was like, whoa. But I really desperately needed that, because I was so emotionally drained after every Les Mis performance. So I'm like crying, empty chairs, you know. And then I go and do Sky, and it's all like ABBA all the time, ABBA all the time, all ABBA all the time. And I did that for a year, and after about the 9th month, I'm like, okay, enough ABBA, enough, you know. But going from there to then Simba, and then to Aladdin, like it's definitely different shows, completely different. And you know, it was cool to be able to work with Disney, like the whole company of Disney. And like there's a lot of cooks at the same time. They put so much invested into what they do, and so to be able to have that experience, to really develop something, because like I said, I was originating that role, and in Simba I replaced it, and a lot of times it's just like, all right, you got to stand here, do this, do that. But with Aladdin, I got to kind of come up with it with Casey Nicolau, the award-winning director, and it's like, you know, I'm so spoiled now when I compare. I never want to just replace. I want to always originate, of course, because it's so much more fun. But Les Mis was just like tearing at your heart, and even Simba, a lot of teenage angst in Simba, and Endless Night when he's singing to his father, and that was, and in Aladdin, there's Proud of Your Boy. So there's moments in every show where you kind of have to switch on and off from like being funny and just having a good time to like really focusing in on the emotion of what you're singing about. So and that's, every good show will have those, you know, those moments, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. We have 2 more questions here. So is playing one of the lead roles in a musical drastically more stressful or high pressure than other roles, or is it all just a lot of pressure, especially on Broadway?
Yeah, I mean, definitely playing a role like Aladdin, it's so iconic. You know, it's a role that was created before I created it, so I had this pressure to at least be as good as the film, and then I put pressure on myself to make it my own, right? And so and Disney is, you know, this is like a multi-billion-dollar property that they're trusting you with. So there's enormous pressure with playing a role like that. When you're playing a role in a new musical that nobody has seen or heard, you get a lot more freedom, less pressure, right? In general, being on Broadway, you are at the top of your game with everybody else who's at the top of their game. So you have to put pressure on yourself to maintain that level of professionalism and also the quality. You're doing the best. You're working with musicians from Juilliard. You're working with dancers from Alvin Ailey. You are in the scene where all these amazing people are working, and you want to give your best as well. So you put pressure on yourself for sure to do your best.
Yeah, makes sense to me. All right, we've got one more question from this is a classic. This is from Henry, who asks about picking a song for an audition. Are you matching what you're auditioning for, or are you strictly going based off of your vocal abilities?
So you're going to want to put together your audition book, a book of songs that you love to sing, that shows off your voice, that you also feel like you can perform well. Okay, so hopefully you'll have an up-tempo, a ballad, and maybe from different time period, a contemporary, a more traditional. You can kind of fill it out and cover most of the genres, and then you want to pick the song that fits the show the best. And you don't have to sing from the show. You don't have to do that, but you can sing something that's similar, that's in the same time period. Maybe it's by the same composer, different show, and that's where you want to do. But most importantly, you want to feel confident singing the song that you're doing. And it's got to be super prepared, and you have to feel like it's really going to show you off. And oftentimes I will sing something that I really love singing, and it might not be exactly right for the show, but I still do it anyway because I feel like it just shows me off the best. And that's just kind of like, you have to kind of weigh that and see what's best.
Yeah, and I'm sure that for these auditions, they have very specific asks. So you're not really wondering, do I need 32 bars? What do I need? So you know exactly what it is you need to walk in with. And then you have...
a lot of times they'll say 32 bars, like a verse and a chorus. That's generally like a verse and a chorus. It doesn't have to be exactly 32 bars, but if it's more up tempo, you get to do maybe a little bit more. It's just got to be sort of like neat and presented in a way that you don't want to like stop in the middle of a phrase. Like that's never good. So like finding the right cut is important, and just all those things play into it, right? And being respectful to the pianist, not like shooting daggers at them if they mess up, that sort of thing. You just have to figure out, and the more you audition, the more confident and more at ease you will seem in the room. And that shows confidence. When you can kind of go in there and like, I know I've done my work, and this is it. This is who I am. Because they want to see what you bring to the table. They want to see your best work. And the people behind the desk are hoping you're going to be that person that they cast. It makes their job infinitely easier if you are that person. Then they're like, oh, great, perfect, done. So you have to think of it that way, right? Don't make them your enemy. Just think of it like you're doing your work that you've done, and that's it.
Yeah, we talk to students about that all the time. Directors want to see you be amazing in the audition.
Yeah, of course.
And be confident and amazing. Nobody's out to get you.
No.
Well, awesome. I have just a couple more of my own questions here before we wrap up. But one of them is something that students usually bring up when we have a guest here. And that is, if you could talk to 18-year-old Adam and give him some advice for the future, what would you say?
I would probably say, don't stress the small stuff. Don't worry too much about, how you think people are going to view you and how they think about you. Because in the end, as long as you are confident that you are enough, that you have everything you need. It's kind of like practicing gratitude now. It's like just being happy with where you are in your life and being okay with that. It's like, obviously you want to grow, but that's recognizing that's a process, and that, things aren't going to just magically be amazing right away. And things and having patience, right? I would have told myself, just have the patience. Just keep going, have patience, and don't freak out. Try not to freak. It's really hard to say don't freak out to a teenager because they're gonna freak out. But just be like, hey, it's gonna work out if you keep working. And yeah, that's what I would say.
It is. And am I wrong? Do you live in the Midwest right now?
I do. Yeah, I'm now based in Chicago. I'm up near Northwestern. I'm
okay. All right,
yeah.
very cool. I actually live in Pilsen, so not too terribly far. But yeah. I'm thinking, what has it been like to experience those three very different theater communities: West Coast, East Coast, and then Chicago? It's completely different ball games.
Yeah, different vibes for sure in each place. You know, San Francisco is definitely more laid back. And then, you know, the energy of New York is just go, 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 go. It's a lot of hustling. LA, you know, I've done some work there. You are totally immersed. Like everybody's an actor. They say that, and it's true, you know. In Chicago, I kind of love it because you have the hardworking Midwest mentality, but then you have these like really amazing creative people. And I don't know. I feel like this. I'm really loving this community right now because, and I'm still new to it. I mean, it's my third year kind of being here. I've done a couple shows at the Marriott, and you know, and I'm hoping to do more work here in Chicago. But yeah, it's a different feel. And despite all that, you know, it really highlights to me just the talent that's across the country, and how I feel like I need to be around creative people. It just reinforces that for me too. Like how I just love being around creative, fun people, and you know, it's a great thing when you get to play for a living and get paid for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah. we are about at our time, Adam, and we've been so lucky to have you. Is there anything else you want to share with the students or our audience here before we wrap up? Anything that's upcoming or just in general?
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, thanks for having me. And I mentioned before, you know, we are near the end of this crazy pandemic thing. So everybody just like hang on a little bit longer. We're going to get there. And check out my album, Right Where I Belong, Alan Menken, on YouTube, on Spotify or iTunes. And yeah, that's kind of it. Got to put in that plug, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think we can link it for you too.
Yeah. But no, it's a pleasure to speak with you, and hopefully you got some actors and people out there who are learning something from my rambling.
Oh, they absolutely will. Well, thank you so much, Adam. And thank you all, students, for being here. You've been a pleasure.
Hi, HAPA.